The winter of 2018 had been brutal. Snowstorms crushed the region, cutting visibility down to almost nothing. Most people stayed home after dark, except hospital staff. St. Augustine Hospital was a 3-floor rural medical center, old, underfunded, and half-renovated. The kind of place where the lights hummed louder than the patients, and long stretches of the building still relied on electrical systems from the 1970s. The night shift typically had 10 staff on duty. But on January 14th, only 3 people had made it in, 2 nurses and a single security officer. The narrator, our source, was that security officer. He had worked there for years. Seen everything from bar fights gone wrong, to overdoses, to confused elderly patients wandering the halls after midnight. But nothing had ever made him fear the building itself. That changed on this night. It was around 2:37 a.m. when the power went out. Not a flicker, not a surge. A total blackout, so fast and so absolute it felt like the whole world had blinked. The backup generator kicked in instantly, but only critical areas lit up. ICU, emergency entrance, the main nurses' station, and part of the 3rd-floor hallway. Everywhere else fell into emergency light darkness, that deep, yellowish glow hospitals use during disasters. Shadows stretched like they were alive. Sound traveled differently, hollower, slower. Security cameras reverted to 10 frames per second emergency mode. Some of them didn't come back at all. The nurses muttered about the storm. But the security officer knew something stranger was happening. The hospital had lost power dozens of times before, but the generator never skipped entire hallways. Not unless someone manually cut circuits. He radioed the maintenance office. No answer. The west wing on the 3rd floor had been shut down for almost 6 years. Water damage, mold, electrical issues. No one was supposed to enter it. The lights didn't work, half the doors were sealed, and the department had been scheduled for renovation. Next fiscal year. For nearly a decade. The security officer rarely had to check it. No patients. No staff. Nothing except old beds, peeling wallpaper, and collapsed ceiling panels. But tonight, one of the emergency hallway lights was flickering on that side, the only light functioning in the abandoned section. And the security camera outside the wing showed something very wrong. A room door, number 3 to 24, slowly opening. By itself. No staff. No patient. Nobody assigned to that floor. Just opening. He radioed the 2 nurses. They insisted no one was up there. The census showed all patients accounted for. He checked the stairwell door logs. The only card scanned in the last 40 minutes was his own. Something was inside the abandoned wing. Or something had come out of it. He grabbed his flashlight. And he began walking toward the west wing. The 3rd floor was silent except for the buzzing of emergency lights. Every step echoed. Every sound felt amplified. But then something impossible happened. As he walked down the hallway toward the sealed section, he heard footsteps above him. Slow. Heavy. Deliberate. But the floor above, the 4th floor, did not exist. The hospital had only 3 floors. And yet the footsteps continued. Inch for inch with his pace. As if something was mirroring him from the ceiling. He froze. The footsteps froze too. He stepped back. The footsteps stepped back. He stood still for almost 30 seconds, breath shallow, trying to make sense of it. The ceiling tiles were old, thin, and yellowed with age. Nothing could support a person up there. Unless it wasn't a person. A sudden crack snapped the air. A ceiling tile shifted, bowing slightly downward. Dust drifted silently to the floor. Something was moving overhead. And it was following him. When he reached the sealed west wing doors, he found them already unlatched. Not forced open. Not broken, just open. As if someone from the inside had carefully disengaged the mechanism. A cold blast of stale air rushed out. Air that smelled like wet concrete and rotting insulation. His flashlight beam cut into the darkness. The hallway looked exactly like it had on every inspection. Wallpaper peeling like dry skin. Ceiling panels sagging. Glass from old lights scattered on the ground. Beds draped with dusty white sheets. Except one thing. Room 3-24's door was wide open, and the light inside was on. But that was impossible. There were no working lights on that side. The electrical panel had been disconnected years ago, the power outage earlier. The flickering light. It suddenly made sense. Something had turned that room's power on. He stepped inside. The room looked like time had stopped inside it. The bed was neatly made. The monitor equipment, unplugged, still sat against the wall. A wheelchair was positioned in the corner, facing the bed, but on the bed was a fresh indentation, like someone had just been lying there. He ran the light over the mattress. The fabric was warm, recently used. His radio crackled suddenly with static. Then a faint whisper threaded through the noise. "Is someone in the room?" It was Nurse Bailey, her voice shaky. Before he could answer, he heard breathing behind him. Slow, raspy, wet. He turned instantly, flashlight cutting through the stale air. No one was there. But the door had slowly begun to close. By itself. He reached for it, but the breathing shifted to the other side of the room, near the wheelchair. His flashlight landed on it just in time to see. The wheelchair moved 2 inches on its own, just a small jerk. But enough to scrape loudly against the floor. The breathing stopped. And the room fell completely silent. He stepped back into the hallway. And then everything escalated at once. Down the abandoned hallway far at the very end stood a silhouette. A human shape. Tall, thin, motionless. It was facing him, and it was not supposed to be there. No one had access to this wing. No patients were assigned. No staff went near it. He raised his flashlight to its face. But the beam flickered, stuttered, and then went completely dark. Only the faint emergency lighting illuminated the figure, enough to see it tilt, its head just slightly as if studying him. He took one slow step back. The figure took one slow step forward. He froze. The figure froze. Then, without warning, the figure dropped to the floor, collapsing in an unnatural, boneless heap, like a puppet with its strings cut. He wanted to run. He should have run. But he walked slowly toward it, radio in hand, breath trembling. When he reached halfway down the hallway, the figure stood back up, fast. Wrong, silently. Not like a human. Like something yanking it upright from above. He stumbled backwards, nearly dropping the flashlight. And then it stepped toward him again, except now. It was not slow. It was sprinting. His brain didn't think. His body reacted. He ran. Boots slamming against the dusty floor, lungs burning. The figure's footsteps thundered behind him too fast, too heavy. Not like a patient, not like any human he'd ever heard. He reached the stairwell door and slammed into it, forcing himself through. But the door didn't close. Something stopped it. Something strong. He pushed his full weight against it, arms shaking. The gap in the door frame revealed only darkness and the faint outline of a hand pressing back. The fingers were long. Too long. He threw himself forward, using his shoulder. The door finally clicked shut. But the impact on the other side nearly knocked it back open, a deep, heavy slam that rattled the hinges. Then a second slam, then a third. He didn't wait for a fourth. He began sprinting down the stairwell, but halfway down, every stairwell light flickered at once. Then went out. Something was in the stairwell with him. He ran faster than he ever had in his life. When he reached the first floor, he didn't stop running until he hit the security office. He slammed and locked the door, breathing in painful bursts. Both nurses rushed over, asking what was happening. He couldn't answer. His mind was scrambling between fear and disbelief. He replayed the third-floor hallway camera. At first, the footage looked empty. Just static, dim lighting, and a long abandoned corridor. But then, a black smear appeared in the far corner. Like a shadow that wasn't caused by any object. It stretched across the wall, then onto the floor, then rose upward into a human shape. The figure. They watched it stand perfectly still. Then its head snapped directly toward the camera. No eyes. No face. Just a dark blur. It dropped to all fours and sprinted toward the lens at full speed. The footage cut to static. The nurses looked at each other, faces draining of color. Then the fire alarm began to ring. But not normally. It pulsed in a broken, uneven rhythm, like someone tampering with the system. And down the main hallway, lights began shutting off one by one, coming closer. The nurses sprinted to the ICU to secure the patients. The security officer followed, though every instinct screamed to get out of the building entirely. Emergency lighting flickered violently. Red warning lights spun across the walls. Monitors beeped irregularly. When they reached ICU, all 4 patients were awake, even the sedated ones. Every single patient was staring at the glass ICU doors. Wide-eyed. Terrified. One of them, a man recovering from surgery, kept repeating, "He's here! He's here! Don't let him in! Don't let him in!" The nurses tried to calm them. But then, one of the cardiac monitors flatlined. But not because the patient coded. The patient's bed was empty. He was gone. Completely gone. No one saw him leave. No alarms triggered. No motion sensors went off. Then, a faint knock tapped against the ICU doors. 3 taps. Slow. Deliberate. The security officer aimed his flashlight at the window. Nothing. Just the reflection of the dim hallway. He stepped closer. And then, a handprint appeared on the glass, but from the inside of the hallway. Smearing downward. Too large to be human. The nurses backed away. The lights went out. For 15 seconds, the entire ICU plunged into pitch darkness. No lights. No monitors. No alarms. Nothing. When the emergency power returned, flickering back to life, Nurse Jacobs was G1. She had been standing 3 feet from the door. Then vanished without a single sound. They replayed the short footage recorded during the OU tage. The camera showed the nurse standing still. Then the screen glitched. And when it recovered, a tall shape stood directly behind her. Unmoving. Blurry. Almost doubling her height. Then the footage cut to black. She was never seen again. At 4:12 a.m., the system's emergency override finally triggered. Authorities were automatically dispatched due to multiple system failures. The hospital's sirens changed pitch. The lights stabilized. Doors began unlocking. And every patient in ICU suddenly stopped moving. Stop. At breathing. They all stared upward. To the ceiling. Listening. The building went silent. Dead silent. And from the 3rd floor echoed a single sound. A DR. Agging noise. Slow. Wet. Heavy. Like something enormous being pulled across the old hallway floors. The security officer felt the vibrations through of the ground. What Eve? I was up there, it was moving again. And coming toward the stairwell. The nurses and officer began pushing ICU beds toward the emergency exit. Cold wind from outside blasted through the doors. Snow whipped inside. They evacuated every patient they could. But before the officer left the building, he turned back. Something stood at the far end of the hallway. Barely visible behind the flickering lights. Not human. Not fully formed. Just watching him. It did not follow them outside. It simply faded backward to the darkness. Like sinking into water. By sunrise, police and fire crews had sealed the entire building. Maintenance logs confirmed no one had accessed the 3rd floor. Electrical records showed room 3 to 24 had no power source at all. Security logs showed Nurse Jacobs never left the ICU. The missing patient was later found in room 3 to 24. Ing on the bed. Dead. Though the room had been untouched for 6 years, fresh footprints were found on the dusty floor. But not human ones. The hospital permanently closed later that year. And room 3 to 24 was demolished. Except workers reported something strange during demolition. No matter how many times they destroyed the walls, poured new concrete, sealed the floors. The indentation on the bed's loca tie-in always came back. As if Someone, or something, was still lying there. Restless. Waiting. Watching.